What is up, besties? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Scotty Holiday. I'm a queer creator and a huge Star Wars nerd, so if you're into either one of those things, please consider subscribing for more. Today we got the release of not one, but two episodes of The Bad Batch Season 2. Episode 7, The Clone Conspiracy, and Episode 8, Truth and Consequences, and I'm going to be reviewing both of them in this video. Throughout this two-parter, we follow a rogue clone trying to expose Vice Admiral Rampart for destroying Tipoca City with the help of some of our favorite senators, the Senate hearings on the defense recruitment bill, and eventually the Bad Batch coming into the fold to help secure the evidence. I really loved these two episodes, and they really had me on the edge of my seat. I can't wait to talk about these two episodes and all the familiar faces we saw as well, but before I get into my review, please make sure to like this video and leave a comment letting me know your thoughts on episodes 7 and 8. I'm putting out weekly reviews for each new Bad Batch episode as they air, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. You can check out all my Bad Batch content at the link in the cards and the description as well. Now, let's get into this review. Right off the bat, we start episode 7 out on Coruscant at the Clone Cantina 79's, first seen in the Clone Wars series. This was such a fun callback and I recognized it right away. I was so happy to see it included in the episode. Inside the cantina, we follow a conversation between two clones discussing Rampart's lies to the Senate about Kamino's destruction, their involvement, and trying to find a way to expose Rampart for his crimes. One of the clones, Cade, goes on to say he sent a message to Rampart telling him to come clean to the Senate before he does it himself, and at this point, I knew he was gonna die. Slip, the other clone, follows Cade outside knowing his safety is at risk, and just like that, a sniper shoots Cade, but luckily Slip is able to get away. From here, we catch up with the Senate who are in session discussing Rampart's Defense Recruitment Act, and in this scene we see many familiar faces. The first, and honestly the one I was the most surprised to see, was Senator Tinra Pamlo of Terrace, who first appeared in Rogue One. She's kind of my Glup Shido of that movie, so I literally screamed at my screen when she started speaking during the session. I also love that the same actress who played her in Rogue One reprised the role for this episode too. From there, Bail Organa comes in to speak, even calling out Palpatine's absence from the proceedings. Then we see the next senator, another surprise, Senator Chuchi of Pantora, who we hadn't seen since season 6 of the Clone Wars, and she looks stunning by the way. Senator Chuchi plays a huge part in episode 7, being the main voice to speak out against Rampart's Defense Recruitment Act and give a voice to the clones, the very group this act will affect. Once again, Senator Chuchi proves to be our humanitarian queen, even going as far as going to 79's to speak with the clones directly. Once she's finally able to get the clones to understand that they can't just be soldiers forever, she tells them, "You spent years fighting for us, let me fight for you." And this response actually made me a little emotional. Senator Chuchi fighting for the clones in this episode also drew huge parallels to the real world, specifically in the United States, of support for military veterans and how our government treats and supports them after their service ends. Yet, once again, people try to argue that Star Wars isn't political. Like, come on, it's right there. Before she leaves the cantina, the clone Slip pulls her aside to inform her the truth about Kamino's destruction, explaining he was on Rampart's Venator during the bombardment. He also explains how anyone who has tried to come forward has been conveniently taken out. We also see in this episode that Rampart is reporting directly to Mas Amedda about the bill's progression, who most likely is reporting directly to Emperor Palpatine. The Imperials know exactly what they're doing. It also all but confirms the Imperial higher-ups are aware that Rampart bombarded Kamino and are fine with him lying to the Senate to cover it up and to further their agenda. From here, Senator Chuchi meets with Rampart to discuss her provisions for the bill, all while she and Rampart both have their men trying to locate Slip. Slip, on the other hand, is trying to disappear, contacting someone to help get him off Coruscant. As much as I love Senator Chuchi, as soon as she started asking how Rampart survived Kamino's destruction, I knew this was going to put a target on her back, which is exactly what he does, telling his sniper assassin to not only find and take out Slip, but Senator Chuchi as well. Senator Chuchi also has a secret meeting with Bail Organa, discussing the convenience of Kamino's destruction and the newly proposed recruitment bill, and at this point, I was really worried about her playing into such a dangerous game. Her guards eventually locate Slip and he informs them of a data backup on Rampart's Venator with proof of the bombardment, but while she tries to convince him to testify to the Senate, he's taken out by Rampart's assassin. A chase ensues and the assassin is able to cut down both of Senator Chuchi's guards, but just when we think she's cornered, she's saved by none other than Captain Rex, who also turns out to be Slip's contact, and I was not expecting that at all. Senator Chuchi explains the situation to Rex, and figuring out the assassin is a clone, they take him to level 1313 for questioning in a very familiar garage, and right away, I recognize this garage as the one belonging to the Martez sisters, Trace and Rafa from the Clone Wars Season 7 and Season 1 of the Bad Batch. Rex attempts to question the assassin, but the clone only identifies himself as a believer before offing himself with an electric capsule, which was super dark, but I kinda love seeing the Bad Batch series go there. Episode 8 opens, catching us up with the Bad Batch on Ord Mantell, just hanging out on their ship, and I can't lie, I wasn't super excited to be catching up with them after the tension and intrigue of Episode 7. Echo approaches Omega in her bunk asking, meditating again? And I wanted to mention this because she specifically says that meditating doesn't work for her the same way that it does for Gungi, with Echo remarking, because he's a Jedi. And at this point, I feel like this is the show confirming that Omega is not Force sensitive. But let me know what you think about that down in the comments below. The Batch gets a transmission from Rex asking them to come to Coruscant to help with a simple data extraction, and though Hunter is hesitant, good boy Echo is like, yeah, we're on our way. He can't say no to his bestie Rex. As they fly into Coruscant's atmosphere, watching Omega marvel at the cityscape around them made me think of a specific line in The Phantom Menace.
The entire planet is one big city.
And I really wish they would have referenced it here. Once they arrive, Rex introduces the Batch to Senator Chuchi and explains the situation. Once again, our good boy Echo is ready and offers to testify right then and there in the Senate on Kamino's destruction, but they instead decide to infiltrate Rampart's Venator in the Coruscant shipyard to extract the evidence, while Omega accompanies Senator Chuchi to the Senate building. I love seeing Senator Chuchi explain to Omega what the Senate does, taking her through the halls and into the Senate chamber. I actually love this sequence a lot. Omega's curiosity really plays into the plot of the episode as she asks why the clones don't have representation since they're part of the galaxy too. And Senator Chuchi explains that she's currently working to ensure the clones have the same rights as any galactic citizen. Now this line hits specifically hard for me as a queer person, since we, along with so many other marginalized groups, don't have equal rights in our own galaxy. She tells Omega, it's a battle worth fighting. And I just have to say, Senator Chuchi is a fucking ally and I love her so much more after these 2 episodes, and I really hope she doesn't die. From here, Senator Chuchi meets with Bail Organa again to give him an update on her findings, and he suggests she reach out to former Kaminoan Senator Halle Bertoni, who was a part of the Defense Finance Committee, to further back her claim. Senator Chuchi and Omega meet with Senator Bertoni, inquiring about the diversion of Kamino funding and where the money went. As suspected, Senator Bertoni's not very forthcoming, saying it's not really of her concern, but Omega is actually the one who gets through to her. Omega really shines in this scene, telling the senator Kamino was her home too, and that she was there during the bombardment. Omega tells her she's angry, and that what the Empire did was not right. I was like, damn Omega, okay. And this was enough to get Senator Bertoni to admit that Rampart diverted the funds, and she agrees to testify in the Senate. We also catch up with Rex and the Bad Batch as they make their way through the shipyard on a Rampart's Venator. Rex has a conversation catching up with Echo, explaining his efforts to protect Imperial clone deserters, remarking that help is hard to come by as of late. In order for them to retrieve the backup file, they end up having to reroute power to the bridge, which of course alerts the Empire of their presence. The Batch is able to hold off the Imperial clones until the data retrieval is complete, and actually power up the Venator to take off, causing it to crash through the shipyard, providing a great distraction so they can escape through the ship's escape pods, and I really just love this sequence. Back at the Senate building, the Senate is holding its final session before the vote on the Defense Recruitment Act. Senator Chuchi has Senator Bertoni testify to the floor, and she calls out Rampart, accusing him of diverting the funds before Kamino's destruction, as if the bombardment was a planned act. Of course, Rampart denies the accusation, but just in the nick of time, Omega gets the data file to Bail, who presents it to Senator Chuchi, and she plays it for the entire Senate floor. As the recording plays out, I feel like Bail is just loving the chaos coming at Rampart in this moment. But then an alarm begins to sound, and we see the center pod rise from the floor with not only Mas Amedda, but Emperor Palpatine himself. There's really a dark and ominous energy that comes over the entire chamber, and the music definitely helps pound that in. As soon as Mas Amedda speaks, calling for Rampart's arrest for furthering his own agenda, I knew this wasn't going to end well for our heroes. Palpatine begins to address the floor in full-on Darth Sidious Sith mode, twisting the bombardment, the Senator's arguments, and the clones' involvement is the exact reason why they need to be phased out and replaced. At the end of the episode, as our heroes meet up before going their separate ways, Rex tells the group that just like during the war, Palpatine is still several steps ahead of their actions, with Hunter confirming to Omega that Palpatine twisted the truth of the matter to his advantage. Echo makes the comment that the fate of all clones is now sealed because of their actions, but Senator Chuchi reassures them that she'll continue fighting for their rights no matter what. As the batch say their goodbyes, Hunter, Wrecker, and Tech also say goodbye to Echo, and when Omega questions them, Echo reveals he's leaving to go with Rex. Which makes sense since throughout Season 2, he's been making comments to Hunter about how he believes they should be doing more to help the galaxy, and I fully support this move for him. I didn't really get emotional at first, but as he says goodbye to Omega, when she throws her arms around him, it really got me in my feels. Needless to say, these 2 episodes were probably my favorite so far in Season 2. They packed in so much of what I loved about the Clone Wars series, and packed in so many real-world connections as well, which is honestly just Star Wars at its best. I loved seeing all the returning characters, including Palpatine, voiced by the Emperor himself, Ian McDiarmid. I also loved how so much of the episode focused on Senator Chuchi, the clones, and the fight for their rights. The only thing I think this episode was missing, for me, was a Mon Mothma cameo. Where the fuck was Mon Mothma in these 2 episodes? But other than that, it was so fucking good, and it makes that scene in Kenobi hit so much harder. But what did you think of episodes 7 and 8? What familiar face were you most excited to see pop up? Let me know down in the comments below or hit me up on Twitter so we can chat more about it together. I'm putting out weekly reviews for each new Bad Batch episode as they air, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. You can catch up with all my Bad Batch videos at the link in the description and on the end screen of this video as well. Please consider checking them out and leaving a like. I really appreciate all of your support. To keep up with all my Star Wars content, make sure to subscribe and consider following me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Scotty Holiday SW for all my latest updates. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.